Welcome very, very much to Conversations. I'm pleased to welcome to the program William, or Bill Lithgow, and he's the president of the New York chapter of a very interesting organization called the Ripon Society. And Bill, welcome very, very much to Conversations.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's nice to welcome you here. We're coming up into the October, into the political year, as it were, and maybe it'd be good for us to talk about the Ripon Society. Maybe you could share with us what the Ripon Society is, when it got started, what its charge was, where it fits in terms of the political spectrum, and then we could talk some about political developments in this political upcoming year. But the Ripon Society, when did it get started, who is it, and so forth?
Okay, sure, Hal. Ripon was founded in 1962 at Harvard University, and it was named Ripon after the city of Ripon, Wisconsin, which is one of the place where the Republican Party was founded, in a log cabin back in 1856.
That's where the Republican Party was started?
Yes, yes, 1856.
Okay.
And there's a log cabin museum still out there in Ripon, Wisconsin.
Right.
In the Midwest, they tend to call it Ripon. We in New York on the Eastern Seaboard call it Ripon. So.
Oh, I see, right, okay. Ripon,
yes.
Ripon, right? And it was fine, and this would have been the party of Abraham Lincoln, and it was a party of abolition and so forth, and it was a third party in its time, right? Am I
well,
right,
the Republican Party at that point was, yes, emerging from the Whigs, with the Democrats remaining the same. The society was founded and given that name in order to, in the 60s, in order to remind Republicans at the time that the party was founded on certain principles after the time of Abraham, or at the time of Abraham Lincoln, and which he believed in, and that we were, the early founders of the Ripon Society were attempting to bring the party back to those fundamentals. And today we still are trying to bring them back to the fundamentals. For example, in one of the early books produced by Ripon, they talked about, this was now in the environment of this early 60s, when Kennedy was president, that young people, young professionals, blacks, and women voters were perceived to be, by the young people who founded Ripon, groups which rightfully, by their history and by their interest, ought to be voting Republican, but seemed to be at that point in time up for grabs in the electorate. And the idea of the Riponites then, and the liberal Republicans of those days, the Rockefeller, Scranton, Javits wing of the party, if you will, were aiming to target those particular groups, particularly, as you recall, that was during the flowering of the civil rights movement.
Yes.
And that was it was felt that they were traditional Republican-type groups that the party should go after. But this was in the time when there was an ideological cleavage, and the conservative forces, led then by Barry Goldwater, were aiming at a different philosophy and a little different orientation. And there was a tug of war at the time between these two ideologies.
I see. So this is more more progressive wing of the Republican Party, and it also harkens back to that the Republican Party was abolitionist, and I know you've been involved recently on this honor roll of abolitionists and so forth, and that's one of the things that's important as far as your stance and something you're committed to, and people very often perhaps don't link the Republican Party as well as they ought to with that honor roll of abolitionist activity on the part of the Republican Party and people who've been in the Ripon Society and sister institutions.
Well, yes, Hal. The honor roll of the abolitionist, as you mentioned, is a scroll, beautiful scroll, designed by a lady in Brooklyn who was the granddaughter of a slave. Her name is Eugenia Gordon.
Right.
And she is the founder and president of a group called the Freedom Republicans. She's a member of our Ripon Society National Governing Board and our National Executive Committee, and she's one of the two honorary co-chairpersons of our New York chapter of the Ripon Society. But she founded the Freedom Republicans out of a strong desire to emphasize, again, the roots of the Republican Party, because she feels that, especially today in the 90s, and even all through the 80s, she felt that the party had gone to a different direction than its roots would have you, particularly in the area of social justice and civil rights. Now, she created the honor roll somewhere back around 1885 or 1985, 1986.
Yes, right.
And she did it for a reason of her own, because she was the granddaughter of a slave, her grandmother. She remembered meeting slaves as a young girl through her grandmother. She remembered talking to her grandmother and to these other slaves and hearing stories from them about the abolitionists and about the conditions under which they lived as slaves and the way of life that they had. But she remembers hearing how much they all thought of the bravery of the abolitionists. So as Lugenia Gordon grew older, she began to read about the abolitionists and ask more questions and to find books, take out books from the library, find magazine articles, and take notes. And she also began to write down their names. Now, I'm not sure at what age she did this, but it went on until a point where she retired right around 1985. She had spent a career working in the New York City civil service, and as well as being a Ripon Society activist all of her life. Around in the mid-'80s, she created the honor roll, and her niece actually did the artwork, but she had done all the research and all the names, and her niece
these are names of people who contributed to the Underground Railroad and to the whole abolition,
the whole movement,
Wilberforce in England, and others who are in, from 1683 to 1883. Virginia had researched names that did include Lord William Wilberforce from England and Daniel O'Connell from Ireland, and others. There are other foreigners, and there were many Americans. Colonel Robert Shaw, who led the Massachusetts Regiment of black soldiers and who died himself in the battle just south of Fort Sumter and early in the Civil War, is on the honor roll, and his story was made famous by the movie Glory. Yes,
and we gave the honor roll to his great nephew a few years ago in the Boston Commons. We had a ceremony, presented him with the honor roll. And other people like that, all through the states, usually from Ohio all the way to Florida, as I recall.
Right, and this is appropriate because it underscores the fact that the Republican Party was born as an abolitionist party, and that's its root.
And a party of civil rights, and it brings back the Emancipation Proclamation. Many times today, the party is not considered a party that is open to blacks and other minorities, and Lugenia wanted to remind people through the symbol of the honor roll that the party was founded for this purpose of minority and was founded for the purpose of civil rights. Whereas today, many times, if you read what some leading Republicans are saying in today's party, you'd wonder, well, were they ever the descendants of the party of Lincoln?
Right.
And Lugenia even goes so far as to claim that she has, to relate her story, that she had seen a bust of Jefferson Davis at the Republican National Committee headquarters in Washington, D.C. Back in the 1980s, and was something which made her very mad, and helped to fuel her concerns. She did, now, over the course of 4 different Republican National conventions, Lugenia and the Freedom Republicans led a fight to change the rules of the Republican convention to seat more delegates from the larger states, which would have the effect of seating more minority group members. And they were not successful in opening up the convention successively, and about 3 years ago they finally forged a lawsuit against the Federal Elections Commission because they felt that the rules of the Republican National Convention and of the Republican Party itself were discriminatory toward blacks and other minorities. And the lawsuit was hinged on the fact that each major political party, the Democrats and the Republicans, gets a $10,000 donation in federal money, taxpayer money, to help finance administrative costs for its national convention. And the suit attempted to enjoin the government from giving this money to the Republican Party until it changed its rules to be more representative of the population as a whole.
Interesting. Yeah, I've seen in the literature that you gave me. Really interesting in that. I'm trying to get an idea of where that fits in, and because you're the party of Lincoln, and you're also the party of Theodore Roosevelt.
Yes,
and progressive Theodore Roosevelt, which people perhaps do well to remember his role in terms of American political and progressive forces in the society.
Yes, and with President Theodore Roosevelt, you bring in the environmental movement.
That's
which started
conservationism.
Then, and the trust busting, which we haven't heard a lot about lately.
No, maybe we ought.
And true.
Right.
I mean, monopolies are in my opinion anyway, have been permitted to blossom again, and certainly there's a big concentration of economic power going on in
Oh,
our
it's
economy
and
right
it's
now.
galloping, isn't
And in the
it?
Western world, yes,
Yeah,
yes
right.
it is.
Yeah.
And that's the Theodore Roosevelt.
That and these are the two figures that you might take as being your, you know, the stalwart people that you would be following in the footsteps of Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, in terms of this branch of the Republican Party, which in the minds of many people, unfortunately, as you're probably aware, has come to be in the minds of many people associated with the interest of big business and with the, you know, with those kind of things, whereas the Democratic Party was thought of traditionally throughout the 30s and that sort of thing as the interest of the little guy, as it were.
Yes.
You would take exception to that because you would say that the Republican Party is and ought to be able to be in the interests of Joe Citizen, and
Yes.
And that with their record, with this progressive record, and this is the branch of the Republican Party that represents that progressive or that moderate wing.
Yes.
And that's important to underscore in this age of Newt Gingrich and you know, a very, very conservative branch of the government that's taken over in
Yes.
the Congress and so forth.
Yes, I would, and
Yeah.
and I think the essence of the dispute today goes to the role of government. Okay, I mean,
Okay.
I think Riponites would believe that, and do believe that, while we should have a more limited government than we have today. I mean, the Democrats on the left are pushing for a very big government, an all-inclusive government that cares for us from cradle to grave.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, you have the radical right, which wants to cut drastically back on government, cut out government services,
Right.
cut it back, and almost let us return to the age of laissez-faire.
Yes, right.
And in the center of this would be the moderate Republicans, where we believe in a limited but a positive government, and that philosophically make the point that government has a role to play for the good in the lives of the public, and that we need a government to keep the playing field level in the area of business competition, to stand up for the consumer, to stand up for the civil rights of individuals and minorities, and to generally protect the individual.
And the environment also is an
and the
important
environment,
part of it,
yes,
right?
yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
And do you find common cause with? Can you find common cause in a certain sense with moderate Democrats, or is that fair to say? Is there a comparable situation as far as the Democratic or the other side of the equation is concerned? And also, where do you all stand now when Mr. Gingrich and this incredible onslaught on the 104th Congress and this conservative push that is so strong within the Republican Party? How are the fates of the stalwart moderate Republicans doing now in terms of the national political development?
Okay, that's a whole lot of questions at
I'm
one
sorry,
time.
I mean,
that's
but-
okay. Let me take a few of them one by one.
Really. The Democratic moderates, and then where do you stand as far as the Republican Party itself?
Okay, let's take that first. The Democratic moderates. Now, I want to distinguish at this point between my own views and then what I maybe perceive as the views of the Ripon Republicans.
Yeah, I
okay?
understand. Right.
I mean, the Ripon Republicans would definitely clearly distinguish themselves from the Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
After all, we have our own office holders, and we must compete against Democrats. And in certain areas of the country, I mean, the Democrats are moderate, and people have accused some of us of being Democrats, and there not being a difference. I don't accept that. I think there is a clear difference, but it's also a difference of degree, and the easiest there is on the area, I think, of national defense,
Mm-hmm.
and on role of government. I think where the Democrats, particularly the liberal Democrats, will
Well,
go...
I'm talking now moderate, what
The
you would call
moderate
moderate
Democrats.
Democrats, not the far left Democrats, but I'm talking about moderate Democrats, or people that you would make common cause in the middle, or somewhere in the sensible middle, Weicker might call it, or something, or Bradley, or another person, Governor Powell.
Well, I think I was getting to that. I was going to say that the liberal Democrats are as would be distinguished from moderate Democrats, are far off on the left wing and are in favor of this all-inclusive government.
Right.
They're almost still McGovernites, okay, and they're therefore this far all-inclusive government and on the role of government and on national defense issues, they are very much almost pacifists. Okay, they are not interested in my opinion, in having a strong national defense. They are very much interested in abolishing the military and cutting the military budgets and using that money for other causes, but not for tax cuts. As I see it, they're more interested in taking that money from the military and using it for other government
They're
programs.
definitely into tax and spend and redistribution, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and your moderate Democrats would not be so much for that. They would be for a strong defense. They would be for a strong military, for keeping us strong in the world. But they would also be for tax cuts in a reasonable way and where it could be done. So
do you think Mr. Clinton is a moderate Democrat? Or how would you classify Mr. Clinton?
Mr. Clinton is all across the board. I find that
Democratic leadership
Mr.
council.
Clinton is, I think, deep down, is a way out liberal Democrat, as his wife obviously is. Okay, but I think he has disciplined himself to talk the language of the moderate Democrats, and so that in his campaign, almost 3 years ago, he came off as one of those. But as soon as he got into office, he began to show his true stripes and began to go back toward the left again, thinking that he was...
You think he's gone to the left?
I think he did at first.
Yeah.
I think now he's coming back toward the center. And,
with the failure of health care. His health care plan
yes.
failed, and so it didn't leave him very much to go that way. I mean, you know, so he... Okay, go ahead.
But with Mr. Clinton, the problem is that he doesn't seem to go in any one particular direction long enough for you to identify what his policy is. And for whatever reason, he will say one thing and then almost immediately change his mind, contradict himself, and you take the policy, whether it was his early positions on Bosnia, which I paid a lot of attention to, where he was for strong intervention and then suddenly backed off, for it again, then backed off.
Well, the whole nation stands guilty on that in a certain sense, you know.
Well, I don't think so. I think there have been firmer voices on Bosnia, and at least been consistent.
Yeah, right.
But President Clinton has wavered, and he will do that on other. Look at
point well taken.
Welfare. I mean, welfare as we know it, that was a campaign promise, and only now is he talking about perhaps signing this bill that was passed the other day in the I guess the House passed it and the Senate is near passing it. I think they passed part of it 2 days ago. But the White House is letting out indications that it will be interested in signing if the Senate Republicans can come to a compromise on the cash for welfare mothers and abolish that the abolition of cash for welfare mothers from the bill, that the president would like to maybe sign something like like what will come out of the Senate in a few days. So there again, he suddenly has come back to something as it's appearing feasible. You know, he's suddenly there, but he hasn't been consistent with this for the 3 years that he's been president. So.
Well, if not Mr. Clinton, where would the Democratic moderates, or those who are the most close to what Ripon philosophy would they be? Who would be some of the representatives of that?
Well, I was talking about Clinton as president, his behavior. Now,
I
think his professed philosophy might be fairly close to what the Ripon Society goes along with, or close to some of our members and what they believe in. But his behavior, and after he professes to believe something, is not consistent. I think Senator Bradley, on the other hand, is one who is there. I think personally, I want to distinguish.
I understand.
What I think the Riponites are for,
I understand.
And myself personally, I can see Senator Moynihan as being fairly close to that in some ways. And I realize, and I live on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Right. We have a competitive two-party system there. I don't know that the Democrats and the moderate Republicans have a lot of philosophical differences. We certainly have differences in organization, differences in personalities, difference in, I think, the ability of our candidates versus theirs, and people like State Senator Roy Goodman, Charlie Millard, John Ravitz, and Andrew Aristoff, our other city council person, in my opinion, clearly are head and shoulders above the candidates that the Democrats have put up, and are a lot more moderate and in the middle on issues than are the Democrats from the Upper East Side.
Okay, what do we mean by moderate? What are we talking about? Because words are getting very confusing now. Liberal, conservative, moderate, liberal. I mean, these words are all getting a little bit conservative. What are the rock core issues of a moderate, in your view, a political moderate in this 1995, 1996 election season as we come up? Fiscally conservative?
Yes.
Oh, okay, or maybe you could
I would say
what do you mean by
fiscally
moderate
common sense.
All right.
I think that they would want to see government spending done economically, efficiently, and for good value and consistent policy, and government limited. Pruning, I think, might be a better word. Pruning of waste in government and positions where feasible.
But
not just taking a meat axe and slashing the government across the board. So I would say that.
So they're not. A moderate is not a wholesale over to a laissez-faire entrepreneurial kind of.
No, we do believe in
agenda
an
that Mr.
activist
Gingrich-
government. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
We do.
And they have the government has a definite role in terms of providing for social stability and
Yes.
social progress. Yeah.
Yes, but still fiscally conservative.
Yeah.
Okay, it's opposed to just
Tax and
spend.
Yes, right. And this is a proud tradition in terms of the Republican Party. If we were to look at it, now let me ask you to differentiate yourself in a certain sense from Mr. Gingrich and company, and that army of really very, very conservative-minded people that seems to have, at least in the media, talk radio and that kind of thing, it's just become a phenomena. Christian Coalition and other kinds of these elements that have come into the political spectrum since in the last election, 1994. And are claiming a mandate and so forth. How do you tend to see that? People in the Ripon Society, yourself or in the Ripon Society? And we know you have to distinguish between yourself and the society.
I looking at the Christian Coalition, most members of the Ripon Society are opposed to its goals, its ideals, and its tactics. And I went to a conference in Washington called Conference for the Republican Majority in July, and that they were a moderate Republican conference. Chairperson of that was former Senator Charles Percy, who was another moderate liberal Republican in his day. And there were some candidates, some people there who had run for Congress in the last election and were defeated by Christian Coalition candidates and spoke pretty ill of the techniques and tactics that were used against it.
Right, they can be pretty...
although respectful, because these candidates from the Christian Coalition apparently are well schooled in their tactics and in their electoral process in their various localities, and know how to organize and get out the vote.
Right.
They are good, and there's no doubt about that. And they are eager and they are militant. Okay, so
yeah, they're becoming a major force now, but they probably only represent a third or so, perhaps. Well, anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
But they are militant.
Yeah.
So and anyway, that's the feeling. I would say most of the moderate Republicans do not like the Christian Coalition. Our former National Ripon Society president, Peter Smith, former Congressman Smith from Vermont, was quite vocal while he was president of the Ripon Society in Washington against the Christian Coalition. Today, I mean, it's talked about. I don't think that we are at all fans of the Christian Coalition. I know Eugenia Gordon would love a chance to have the Christian Coalition attack her, and especially have a chance at Pat Buchanan.
Yes, right.
She has even on occasion said that Pat Buchanan, he does brag quite a bit about his great-grandpappy being a Confederate soldier in the Civil War.
Oh, I see, right.
Eugenia Gordon has frequently said that he ought to go back to the South and stay there and leave the Republican Party because he's not a true Republican.
Right.
So that's some example of it. But why inflame them? Why antagonize them, organize against them, be against them? I think, for example, that the Christian Coalition has got it only half right. I mean, I do believe there is a spiritual crisis in this country, and indeed in probably the whole Western world. But I don't necessarily think it's a religious crisis, and I don't necessarily think that legislating the morality is going to be effective. Now to go back to your thing about Mr. Gingrich.
Yeah, and the 104th Congress, and the radical right.
Okay, the way I would define that is to look at the contract with America. Yes. And for sure, in the Contract for America plank, I can't go along with is the balanced budget amendment. I don't think that I'm for a balanced budget, obviously. I'm in finance. I work in finance. I think that we dearly need to get our budget back into line, but I do not think that the amendment is the process, because you need to use that power of the fiscal powers of the government when there are bad times. You need that reserve for stimulation of the economy.
Mr. Keynes.
Yes. You just need that. It's almost like needing an engine to get a car started. When the motor goes dead, you got to get it started.
Yes, right.
And the balanced budget amendment would prohibit that. You just would not have that option.
Yeah, it could lead to a disaster. It could lead to a real recession or on to worse. Yeah, it could.
Yes. I think it definitely could.
Yeah, all right.
So I'm against the amendment. I'm for a balanced budget, but I'm for doing it by law, by compromise, by working out policies, and by looking at the longer term, not trying to let it come crashing down.
And I don't mean to be, anything. You're saying you, and you're saying we. Do you think that your views are fairly close to what would be the consensus views of the Ripon people? I mean,
okay,
make that
we've taken no
again.
corporate position on that, on the balanced budget amendment. I know just from my own friends within the Ripon Society, there are those who believe in the amendment. Okay, I mean, I do not. Okay, but so that might be a mixture of views there, though, within the Ripon Society today.
Right. But what about the stressing upon the entrepreneurial and Mr. Ging, you know, the Alvin Toffler and the whole view that he presents in terms of the revolutionary thing, and to trying to cut back en masse on government intervention in the economy and that sort of thing, and seeing government as the problem.
Okay, well that would not be the views of and the attitudes of the Ripon Society members who were part of the Ripon Society when it began back in 1962.
Right.
But like the rest of American society, the Ripon Society has moved somewhat to a different center of gravity today, and you do have people now represented in the society who would be more in favor of those views, okay? And so therefore you have, and it should be this way. I mean, as times change, philosophies change, individuals change. I don't see anything bad in that. I'm for looking for a consensus and getting a free play of ideas. I remember Everett Dirksen used to always talk about hammering out progress on the anvil of discussion. I remember that. Remember that theme, and I certainly am one who believes in that. And I personally, again, that's why I must keep coming back to my own ideas.
Right, I understand.
I believe that there's good in the various policies, and you must be able to take some of one policy, some of another, and some of another, and put it into a mix that makes some sense. So I come to that. Now, for example, on Newt Gingrich, he again, I heard him speak at the 92nd Street Y, just right around the 4th of July. He was beginning his book tour at the time. And I went there out of curiosity, and I didn't think I would have much in common with him at all, from what I had read about in the newspapers and seen on the talk shows on TV.
He can be pretty engaging when he talks.
Well, the first time I heard him, yes, he was very engaging. I had a totally different impression than I had been led to believe by the media.
All right.
And Charlie Rose interviewed him for an hour, and in front of those who were in the auditorium, and it turned out it was the second hour of it with Charlie Rose. He had just finished taping his Charlie Rose's TV show for that night. Right. And I was quite impressed. There's no doubt about it. Anybody who says that Newt Gingrich isn't smart is crazy. The man is extremely intelligent. He knows his history. I was extremely impressed by his analysis of President Clinton, and he went into depth about this when Charlie Rose asked him that question. He went into depth about the president's thought processes and how he will, in his own mind, thinking he's doing the right thing, go out and declare himself for something, but then back off, and then back off, and then back off, change his tack a little bit, and so by the end of a month, he's entirely in an opposite direction of where he started to go.
Waffling.
Yeah, in his mind. And Gingrich gave him the benefit of the doubt and said that he felt the president was in his own mind
confused,
doing what he believed in, but it's his thought process that just kept changing.
And that rang true to you?
Yes, definitely.
Right. All right. Well,
and other things that Gingrich impressed me about was his feel of history, and I'm glad you mentioned Tofflerism. I have read Future Shock, and I'm a believer in the future, and I admire Gingrich for that. I mean, I think he's really got a handle on some ideas where America should be in the next century. Right. And he's given a tremendous amount of thought to this, and I am impressed by that, okay? And he has given thought to that. Now, I'm not prepared at the moment to go item by item with that, but he has given a lot of thought to that.
I understand,
And in other areas. Now, I don't, once again, you get into specifics, and I'll start to disagree with his views. But personally, that was an impression I got. Now, there it goes back to my own ideas that you need to be able to look at something and discount what the media. I'm finding the media can really oversimplify anyone's comments and approach, and then they will just tend to beat up on that and to take a position and oversimplify it. On my recent trip I was on a recent trip to Ireland, and I
you presented the honor roll.
Yes,
if I'm not
yes,
mistaken.
that's what we presented on that trip.
The abolitionist honor roll, right?
We presented the abolitionist honor roll to the great-great-grandson of Daniel O'Connell, whose name was on the honor roll, and the great-grandson's name was Professor Morris O'Connell, who had retired after 24 years as a professor of history at Fordham University, which I didn't have any idea when I went over there. I was expecting to see someone who had lived in Ireland all of his life, and lo and behold, I met another New Yorker.
There you go, right.
But he had retired back to Ireland and to living now between Dublin and County Cork, which is the, County Kerry, which is the ancestral home of his great-great-grandfather, and where he is going to put that home is now a museum, and they are going to put the honor roll of the abolitionists in that museum.
Well, good. That's good for the Freedom Republicans, yeah.
But if I may go back for a second,
yes,
on that trip we had, I think it was 11 members of the Bow Group from Great Britain. They are.
Yeah, that's a comparable group to the Ripon, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
a model, in fact. It was model for Ripon?
The Bow Group is within the Conservative or the Tory party of Great Britain. What the Ripon Society is within the Republican Party here in the States. And at the time the Ripon Society was founded, the Bow Group had already been founded, had been in existence as a think tank and as a vehicle for the publication of new ideas and debate about governmental policy within the Conservative Party then. And Ripon was modeled to a great extent after the Bow Group. So, in fact, the first transatlantic conference that we had was back in the early 80s, and it was, I think it might have been 1980 even. It was co-sponsored jointly by the Bow Group and the Ripon Society. It was in Washington, D.C. The first year, then it went to London, and then it alternated back and forth, and then it went off to other parts of Europe. And this last year, the conference was in London, and it was co-sponsored by the Bow Group and the Ripon Society. This past year, the one in Dublin was sponsored by the Ripon Society, or actually our subsidiary, the Ripon Society Educational Fund. But I brought up the Bow Group for a reason, because while I was there, one of my friends from England, at one of our dinner conversations, someone had asked me a question, and before I could answer the question as a joke, one of my British friends says, "Oh, Bill is going to give you a typical American view, which is simplistic like that of a couch potato, simply black and white, because that's all Americans do. Well, and sit around and watch TV, but also he was making the comment that our politics tend to be oversimplified. And it came up in a discussion. The reason it was said was that it was a discussion of, in Ireland, there's something like 4 different major political parties in a country that's 3 million people. And someone had commented, well, wow, I'm surprised that there were so many shades of opinion, and that's how that story came back. Bill will give you an American opinion, which is going to oversimplify everything and make it black and white and nothing in between.
And they just had that as a given, right? Yeah.
Well, that's what I heard, and I was kind of shocked because I myself try to look at all sides of every
I understand. And you know there's more diversity here,
Yeah, but I think it was a true comment on our politics, at least as portrayed by the media, because the media tend to gloss things up and to polarize, and to make things very much oversimplified.
Yeah, so well, they have the same problem in Britain. I mean, in a certain sense, they have Fleet Street, and they have all kinds of things that are going on over there. I want to back up again. You were talking about Gingrich, and you were talking about, you were saying, you came away with the impression that you're, by and large, well impressed with Mr. Gingrich and what he's doing?
Well, as a person.
And I wonder, what do you think about that movement to the degree that they would perhaps challenge the safety net? They want to call it a hammock.
No, I'm against that.
And the government systems on helping some of the disadvantaged people in our society.
No, I'm against their cutbacks there, and I think they're going too fast. I think they're very efficient. They're doing things in a very efficient way.
Yeah, which can be frightening.
Well, sure, because there should be more thought, particularly when you get to the area of welfare, which is now undergoing some change in the Senate, and I'm glad to see it. I'm glad to see that moderates left Dole on that, and even D'Amato is not a moderate, but he left Dole on that, and he went over and voted against that too, because of the realities of our big cities, and especially New York. You can't cut like that.
They're going to blow up, but particularly given the fact that, as you said, you indicated before, there's a long-term trend of a disequilibrium in terms of economics in general, which is a problem not only in the United States but in the West.
Well, I think it's wrong. I think the causes
out of hand, really.
Yeah, but take, for example, illegitimate children. The causes of that are so much more complex than merely a desire on a mother's part to have a baby to get more welfare money.
Obviously.
That is just too simplistic. And besides that, cutting it back too fast would have the effect, in my opinion, of taking it out on the children and the babies instead of adults. Many of them are caught up in circumstances they can't control.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I saw a piece in the paper the other day where they said that something close on to the number of people who are in our school systems, which is something like 6 million, I think they said, is going to be under the criminal control system soon. They're now getting close to the numbers are equal. You got 1.5 million in prison and in jails. You got 3.5 million in parole and that kind of detention system. And they soon the numbers are going to cross soon. So I mean, you'd be investing on that side of things, and rather than making sure that we can keep some sort of, you know, equilibrium going in the society, where if they just cut those safety net things out, we're going to be in deep, deep trouble, given the fact that the private sector is just more and more concentrating the wealth in fewer and fewer hands, I'm afraid.
I agree, and I think
there's
that
a big problem. Michael Lind, both of us have agreed that he's a very important writer, has emphasized this recently.
Okay, well, yes, on Michael Lind, I have only recently been introduced to some of his ideas, and I have not read his book yet, but in my flight back from Dublin to New York on August 27th, my birthday was August 27th.
Oh, well, birthday.
I bought, I was trying to pick up a copy of the Irish Times, because the Sunday morning Times, because I had been to a political street rally in Dublin the afternoon before. Mm-hmm. The conference had ended on Friday night, and I spent Saturday in Dublin doing some shopping and some sightseeing of my own, and came across a rally, a Sinn Féin rally, with Jerry Adams speaking and others, and I found it kind of interesting. And I wanted to get the copy of what he had said, because I couldn't take notes fast enough in the park with all the people around me. So
right.
But I accidentally picked up the London Times instead, mm-hmm. and that's where they had a whole 2 pages dedicated to this subject of the overclass.
All right, right. It's definitely emerging, yeah.
They had a Michael Lind article by him about his book, and they had other articles about it.
I think it's called. Yeah, it's really a good book, I would say. You know, at the outset, a young man, early 30s, but he writes very well. Yeah.
Well, go ahead. Yes.
No, it's all. Go ahead.
I think he's hit on to something with the overclass being a class that is. Let me see if I can remember it all now. But it is a class that is looking for. It is not motivated by altruism. It is not the class of the wealthy industrialists, descendants looking for using the money in a good way in society. It is a class of professionals and commercial type people who have made a lot of money and who are. The word, I believe he used the word greed, but greedy for more and more beyond any reasonable need, and I can see that. And he talks a lot about these top executives of major corporations earning 50 to 60 times what the average worker in their relative economies, because he talked about it being in the British economy, the American economy, other Western economies, and he used the whole world, all various capitalistic economies, but this concentration of more and more wealth in the hands of fewer and fewer individuals who are a managerial class and stockholders.
Yeah, right.
To the benefit, to the chagrin of employees who used to be a group that was part of the profits of a company. Yeah. And consumers, another group that would be linked into the company and any given company's community, and certainly a capitalistic community, but to the benefit only of ownership and top management.
And the ownership being very more narrowly held all the time. Yes. And you got this real problem, and you know, and then you got erosion, concentration of both wealth and income, because the income follows the wealth, and the wealth is more and more becoming concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. And you know, as you know, I'm interested in the idea of, you know, perhaps the technological displacement of labor in terms of its relationship to production. Largest employer in our country now is manpower, temporary agency. And so there goes benefits, there goes a lot of those long-term benefits that the traditional working person is able to achieve in terms of having a decent standard of living. And the income is not following productivity increases anymore. It's going down. It's leveling out and going down. Even against inflation. So there are all these problems, economic problems, which traditionally Democrats, I don't know for Republicans or moderate Republicans, Democrats have tended to associate problems and angst among the society with economic problems. They tend to associate with that. Do you as well? Do you think that the main problems are economic, or do you begin to get over into the social issues as well, and so forth, as far as Ripon and moderate Republicans are concerned?
Well, no, I personally, and I think most of our Ripon community would, certainly the moderate Republican community, would look at the economic ills that are going on today and think that is our long-term problem in this country.
Yeah, right.
Our wages,
That's
not our productivity so much anymore. That has made some temporary gains, but our long-term economic viability.
Yes, right. And equity, questions of equity. I mean,
going down.
Yes,
and a lot of it based on the budget deficit, the national budget deficit.
Okay,
being an underlying.
That's all going to bond.
Underlying cause of this.
Yeah.
And how we deal with it. Yes, I think that is a major problem. I think that our group would go along with that. However, when you get to the idea of what to do about that and what is the role of the corporation in American society, I can say right now that our Ripon community is divided. I mean, there are people who would argue with me or argue on this particular subject for quite some time that mergers are good for the economy in the long run. They're not the bad thing that I tend to think they are. I think that the concentration of power through all these mergers of big firms absorbing little firms and then cutting them off is bad, okay? But nevertheless, I might be in the minority side within the Ripon Society or the moderate Republican community on that issue. Well, we are, after all, I mean,
that's something
we're all conservatives
in
economic, laissez-faire. We are believers, basically, in a strong private enterprise system. So I must be fair there and say that what I'm saying right now about that subject is very debatable and very controversial in our circles. Okay?
Yeah, I don't want to put you on the spot again with this Gingrich thing and with the Gingrichite branch of the Republican Party, but would you be, you left it, you'd had that, that you get along more? Are there major differences that you have as far as you look at that part of that wing of the party?
Well,
is there a major difference between those New Turks that are in this Congress, you know, and those radical, in a certain sense, Republican people and yourselves? Because you had very good things to say about Mr. Gingrich. I don't know.
I did, and I was going to say, well, there are differences. Yes, there are. But I think that more and more of these are going to be played out within the Ripon Society and the moderate community, because you're getting, as the country has turned more and more to the right, the center of our politics has moved also toward the right, and so what is a moderate today might have been considered a right-winger 50 years ago.
But you're basing your thing on certain principles and on certain bedrock principles. I mean, when you go to Lincoln and you go to Theodore Roosevelt, you're on certain principles.
Yes.
So, and the degree to which they get away from those principles, then if Ripon people move away from those, then they're moving away from the principles of the Ripon Society or the moderate.
That's a good
point.
That's a good point.
I mean, there's steersmen, and also I wonder. We talk sometimes about Republicans, or we talk about Eastern establishment people and these kind of things. It would seem to me many of the Eastern establishment people, other than just some hotshot Novi Riche something or other person or something, that they might very well, many of those people, moderate Republicans, might well resonate to the message of the Ripon Society. Am I wrong in that, or is that correct?
No, I think you're correct.
Yeah, all right.
And the going back to the balanced budget amendment for a minute, I mean, I think you would find many Riponites and moderate Republicans who might go along with that balanced budget amendment, for example. I do not.
Right, okay, yeah, I understand you.
And you will find this debatable on the concentration of economic power. So on economic themes, I think, even tax cuts, okay, and the degree to which we should have them, you know, you will find some debate there and, you know, among moderate Republicans. When you get to the social, and with Gingrich, I think that he goes in his philosophy far beyond anything I would go along with. I was saying that as a person, I was surprised when I saw that. Okay, when I heard him. He's got a winning way.
He's got a winning way.
Yeah, well, yes, and he's a leader. I mean, that is true.
Yeah, that's something we're looking for. Yeah,
he is a leader. What I was saying, he at our annual Ripon Society dinner, he has put women, for example, in positions of power in the leadership of the current House leadership. One of them is Congresswoman Susan Molinari from Staten Island, Barbara Volkanovich from Ohio, and others, and Senator Nancy Landon Kaspam is our Ripon Society's national chairperson right now. So Speaker Gingrich had put these four women in positions of power, and before our annual dinner back in July in Washington was focused on the theme of women in power, you know, in America, and we were honoring those four congresswomen and Senator Kaspam, And Speaker Gingrich he came onto the auditorium on a tape, which I have a copy home, and spoke about the benefits of that, and that he was glad to be addressing the Ripon Society.
Yes, right.
So he is a leader, and it was a legitimate point, I think, to ask him and to respect his position of power to do that. This is controversial, what I'm saying right now.
I understand.
And I know Virginia Gordon is probably leaping up and down on her couch at home, mad at me for saying this.
Well, the Ripon's not going to be adverse to having a lot of different views.
No, I think it's healthy.
They got a pretty big tent.
I think it's healthy.
Big tent philosophy that they try to live under, right?
Yes, and I like that word, if I can object to that. It's a good, the concept is fine.
Yeah.
It comes from, the word itself, Big Tent, comes from Lee Atwater, when he was our national chairperson. However, if you go back a little farther to former Governor Nelson Rockefeller, he used to say it a different way, and I always remember what he said, and I like it better. I think it has a little more class than that term, Big Tent.
Yeah, right.
And what he used to say was, the Republican Party should be big enough, have shoulders big enough and broad enough to encompass many different points of view.
I see,
and I used to like the way he said that. I learned that when I was watching him as a young man.
Yeah, right. I hear you.
Always stuck in my mind, and you'd have to call me a Rockefeller Republican because I am. And a Javits. Senator Javits is another one we haven't mentioned yet, but certainly in New York we model ourselves very much after his record.
Yeah. And
in fact, our National Ripon Society every October has a Jacob K. Javits dinner in New York, and it honors a politician or an office holder that it feels lived up to his legacy. And
okay, so and they have that sense of social responsibility, and again, underscore the fact there are many people in that what they would call establishment, Eastern establishment, that might very well resonate to Ripon Society's views. Now, I wonder if we could talk. We're getting short on time. Here we are coming up 1996, right? It's coming barreling down so fast, Bill.
Yes.
I mean, where in the world did it come from, right? But we're coming into an election year. We're coming into a very, very interesting election year. What do you see when you look at it? Let's talk about you, Bill Lithgow.
Well,
you have your own sense of things, and maybe Mr. Powell, Mr. Bradley, Mr. Perot, wild cards and so forth, and Republican Party. Is it Mr. Dole's to lose, or what? And what do you think is going to happen? Do you think there's likely to be an independent party? What do you see happening? When are things going to start exploding, if there are explosions? What do you see as you look out ahead over the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 months, 12 months?
Okay, well, I think that, as I've told you, I think that everything up to now has been kind of quiet, and things are going along in certain directions, but I think there will be some explosions and some action, and I think it's going to begin. Maybe December 15th is when Newt Gingrich said that it is he must make his decision. I think December 15th is when the filing for the New Hampshire primary closes, and I think that's when, at first I thought that's when things might begin to blow, but now maybe around Thanksgiving time. Certainly with Colin Powell going on his book tour beginning today, that part is beginning, the media hype is there for him, but I think he touches deeply a chord in this country, especially when he talks about being an immigrant son and being a person from Harlem who has risen to a high position of a poor person from Harlem who has risen to a high position of power in the decision makers of this country.
Right, and that we have not yet reached a level playing field as it relates to affirmative action.
Oh, well, he even calls himself a Rockefeller Republican.
Right, right.
And he has, and yet he hasn't chosen to enroll in either party, but the views that he is going for, if you look at them, I was reading the excerpt in Time magazine before I came in, and the views that he's coming out on, apparently on Barbara Walters' interview tonight, are right down the line. Ripon,
we should say this is October 15th for those who are viewing, because it won't be aired now.
Okay, today is October 15th.
Right, yeah.
But they are
or September 15th, sorry. I'm sorry, Bill, go ahead.
That's okay. They are moderate Republican views consistently, and it's a sore point with me as a tangent to this, that frequently, you will hear that those views considered Democrats' views, and the Republicans are the right-wing conservatives.
It's getting hard.
And they always forget about us. We are in the middle.
Right,
Ripon Society is moderate Republicans, but we are never mentioned in the media. We are not. You don't hear that word. And even today, with Powell having called himself a Rockefeller Republican, today the hype is simply that he's a centrist and he may be an independent. But and I can't say that he himself is a Ripon community person, but he looks like one to me.
Yeah.
Okay, and he sounds like one.
Yeah, right. That's right.
But he hasn't said that, and I don't think he's actually paid his dues.
To be Ripon.
Yeah,
but he is
sounds like one to me.
And it's interesting, isn't it, in terms of the national consciousness, that he is somebody, of course, he stands out bigger than life in terms of his being a hero and that sort of thing, and a figure of leadership, which, again, you stressed with Mr. Gingrich, but he's a leader.
Well,
I think
General Powell's a leader, for sure.
Yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I meant.
It's more his philosophy is more of a positive philosophy than a negative philosophy.
Yeah.
I think Gingrich's philosophy is negative, okay, much of it, not positive, but I did say some nice things about him, but I think, it's a negative kind of thing.
Yeah.
Powell also has a vision, okay, and he is going to be, I think he's very wise to handle himself the way he's doing. I think that there's a time and a way and a place to do things, and it shows a lot of class, and it shows a lot of ability to me that he's managing the way he's coming out so well.
Yeah, what I'm saying in a certain sense is that there's this longing for a sense of leadership among the American people.
I believe that.
Yeah,
definitely.
it does seem to be that. And there has been. I mean, it's shown. I don't think it's just Democrat and Republican. There was a sense of, in a sense, throw the rascals out in 1992. 1994, and there might be in 96. I mean, or in a sense of angst and upset with the status quo. And maybe it's hard to put your finger on exactly why it is. Maybe it's some of these economic issues, some of these other things, but there's a widespread sense of discontent. Mr. Perot could not have gotten 19–20% of the vote if there had not been. But in any event, they're looking for some sort of leadership, and Mr. Powell represents that. And it's interesting to me that, as you say it, he represents in many ways, without perhaps absolutely saying so, he represents the stance that the Ripon Society traditionally has. So the Ripon Society might be more of what the American people was looking for than perhaps they realize.
Well,
if you
we are
understand
centrist.
what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yes, I do, and I think that's true, and
Yeah.
I don't know why we don't get more recognition or our approach, and I'm not trying to toot Ripon's horn so much this time, but the moderate Republican. I mean, there is a moderate Republican as opposed to a conservative Republican, and the press doesn't seem to make that distinction. They lump us off frequently with the Democrats.
Well, we're trying to make that distinction here.
Oh, you are, yes,
yeah,
yes.
Right.
But there are differences, and I definitely think there are differences.
Okay, what do you think is going to happen? Is Mr. Let's just talk Republican Party now. What's going to happen in the Republican Party? Is it Mr. Doles, or is there going to be it's going to be a pretty hotly contended thing? What do you think is going to happen?
At a gut level, I just a feeling that I kind of feel Dole's candidacy will eventually disintegrate. I could be wrong,
really, yeah.
But I think that it's more broad than deep, and I think that you see. I'm not going to say I see Gingrich going for it, but
you think
the possibility is there. Like I say, things could erupt, and you could wind up with a Clinton, a Powell, and a Gingrich. Okay, and there's three different segments of society. There's a real three-way race right there.
You'd have Mr. Clinton in the Democrat, you'd have Mr. Gingrich in the Republican, and Mr. Powell in the third party?
I'm a minority of a few who would say this, but people I talk to don't see that. They all say Newt won't do it, and he's not going to run, doesn't want it, isn't ready for it. But
what makes you think, Mr. Doles, he's so far ahead now? What makes you think that he is going to? I mean, what makes you? Well,
I think he's going to start taking a pounding on some of these things, like the thing with the log cabin.
Yeah,
he gave back the $1,000 contribution.
Yeah.
I should point out clearly that the Log Cabin Club are Ripon supporters. We have board members who are Log Cabin Club members.
Well, again, you're socially.
We are for them.
You're for civil liberties, and that's something under stress. That's something to stress again.
And I read on last Sunday's op-ed page of the Times the account by the president of the Log Cabins, the national president of the Log Cabin Club, explaining how this Dole position in giving back the money came about. And from what I can read, is simply that he did it in it was a political posturing, image-conscious kind of maneuver.
Yeah, I think it was a mistake.
And I think people can see through that. I think it's a mistake too.
Yeah.
But I think you get more and more of that kind of thing. And his age. Okay, and so right now he sort of has a hammerlock on a lot of states, but I think that can be broken. I think if Powell comes out as an independent, or even if Perot comes back, it's going to start to break. It's going to start to break open. What do they call in politics? And earthquakes. Cleavages,
right.
Not cleavages. That does.
It's make the four parties of Ireland look like a picnic, right?
There could be. I can't think of the word for in geology. There's a word. Fault lines.
Yeah, fault lines.
Could break. Yes.
Well, you. Let me ask you this. Maybe it's not fair, and maybe I shouldn't, and everything. But who would you like to see emerge as the
Personally,
Republican?
I'm hoping that General Powell declares and that he...
As a Republican?
No, I don't think he has a chance to get the Republican nomination. I think the conservative and the Christian coalition people who back them they've worked for 4 years to get control of the machinery.
They sure have.
They dominated the last convention, and they've got control of this. And I think that's unfortunately why Senator Dole is trying to please them, and I think people see through that, okay? But that's what he and the other candidates are trying to do. The only exception right now is Arlen Specter, but I don't think he has a chance to get the nomination. I think he would do extremely well and be a good president.
So you think Mr. Powell's route is an independent?
I think definitely, and I think that's the big news, the big guts that the country, I think, is inclining toward a third party. Many people say that the Democrats are the party that's actually going to, in the long term, fall apart, not the Republicans, because the Democrats have got such internal inconsistencies themselves that the so-called moderate Democrats can't stand being in the same camp with these way out McGovernite types. And that there's where the real fault lines are, and in fact, these Democrat members of the House and the Senate who have recently become Republican exemplify it.
Let me ask you, we're running out of time, sorry, we could go on talking at great length, but what about Mr. Bradley? What's Mr. Bradley? How's he going to figure in this, do you think?
I don't have an idea on that.
You don't?
I don't know what his intention was. It's been, I think, somewhere rejected that Powell would link up with him. I think Powell's been indirectly quoted for saying that. You know, many were hoping that that might be a dream.
Well, Powell seems to be just leaving everything open. You know, I mean, he's just taking that position right now. He's probably going to have to get focused a little bit in the next couple,
but I don't know where. I don't think Bradley fits into it. I don't know where Bradley fits in. I don't know what he intended. He said he's leaving politics because he's disgusted with what's happening in Washington. Then you come up with the phenomenon of former Governor Kane, who is a clear moderate Republican,
didn't want to take it,
doesn't want to get active, doesn't want to get involved. Why did he do that? I've heard some rumors that he had the practical possibilities of him getting the nomination for the Senate in New Jersey are foreclosed because of whoever controls the party there.
That's one reason.
I don't know that. I don't know that.
Well, anyway, and so you got. I'm sorry we're running out of time. We're on talking so easily for that, and we'll probably be talking again as we come into the election season and that kind of thing is coming up. But Bill, I want to thank you really very, very much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And I would remind you, and you have your New York City chapter of the Ripon Society. There's a national system. We didn't get a chance to talk about all of that, but they can get in touch with you and so forth. The Ripon is in the book. Is it in the book? Or?
No, but they could get in touch with me through the Metropolitan Republican Club. I'm a vice president there.
Okay.
The number is 212-288-8606, or through Eugenia Gordon and the Freedom Republicans in Brooklyn, area code 718-439-8542.
Okay, fine. That's good. And it's been your pleasure. The Ripon Society, interesting organization, one that ought to be more known about, and it probably would be, I think. Maybe their time, in a certain sense, is coming in a way that it hasn't been recognized and so forth, and happy to have talked to you about it, and happy to have had your perceptions on what's coming up in this political season. We on Conversations invite you to tune in. We'll be coming back again next week on Conversations. That's it for now. Once again, Bill Lithgow, once again, thank you very, very much for coming in. Okay, see you next time. Until next time.